This was the moment everybody had been waiting for. After 3 seasons of back-and-forth heartbreak, miscommunication, and love triangles that felt like they'd never end, The Summer I Turned Pretty finally gave us an answer. Who did Belly truly choose, Conrad, Jeremiah, or herself? Episode 11 didn't just feel like a finale. So, with that, let's dive straight into it. Here's The Summer I Turned Pretty Season 3 Episode 11 explained. It all began in Paris, a city that felt far away from Cousins Beach but still carried the same kind of nostalgia that lingered over every summer they spent together. Belly had been living her new life, studying, exploring, trying to find herself again. But no matter how far she went, Conrad was always there somewhere in the back of her mind. What she didn't expect was for him to actually show up on the eve of her 22nd birthday. It had been over a year since they'd seen each other, and when she ran into him, it wasn't some over-the-top dramatic reunion. It was quiet, simple, but the silence between them said more than words ever could. As they walked through Paris, Belly playing tour guide and Conrad just soaking it all in, the flashbacks hit like waves. Every street corner seemed to bring a memory, their beach trips, their late-night talks. All those times they almost had it right but couldn't quite hold it together. It was obvious from the way they looked at each other that nothing had really changed. They were both pretending to have moved on, but deep down, that same pull was still there. The one they could never really shake off. Conrad had planned to leave that night for Brussels. His train was at 8, and he told himself it was just a quick stop in Paris, just passing through. But when Belly invited him to stay for her birthday celebration with her friends, that plan started to crumble. He looked at her, the way she smiled, the way she laughed, and you could tell the jealousy kicked in. When Conrad noticed her joking around with Benito, for a second he thought she'd moved on. But the truth was, Belly and Benito had broken up 6 weeks earlier. She wasn't over Conrad. Not even close. When her friends brought out the cake, Belly made her birthday wish. We didn't hear what it was, but her expression said enough. Later, she admitted that every year, she'd wished for Conrad. And just like that, it all made sense. Her heart never really left him. Even when she tried to forget, she couldn't. That moment felt like the calm before the storm, quiet but charged with something you couldn't quite name. After the party, the two of them found themselves by the river under the full moon. The city lights reflected in the water as that song played. The one with the line, "I only have eyes for you." It wasn't just music. It was foreshadowing. You could feel what was about to happen. The tension that had been building for 3 seasons finally broke when Conrad asked her if she'd moved on. Belly didn't answer. She just kissed him. And from there, it spiraled into the most passionate moment in the show's history. The one that felt like it had been waiting years to happen. For a while, it felt like everything they'd gone through, the fights, the heartbreak, the jealousy, was worth it. Like they finally got their chance. But The Summer I Turned Pretty doesn't let things stay perfect for long. Right after that moment of pure connection, Belly started to question everything. She wondered if this was real, or if Conrad was just another chapter she needed to close. Her voice cracked when she told him to catch his morning train, that she didn't want him to miss out on his conference for her. You could see how torn she was, wanting him there, but terrified that loving him again would ruin the stability she'd worked so hard to build. When she said, "Don't change your plans for me because I wouldn't change mine for you. I have a life here," it felt like she was trying to convince herself more than him. And that's what made it hurt even more. Conrad told her he loved her, but she couldn't say it back. Not because she didn't feel it, but because she was scared of what it meant. Scared that maybe his love for her was tied to the past, to memories of his mom, to the way everything used to be. She didn't want to be loved out of guilt or nostalgia. She wanted to be chosen for real. So she pushed him away. She told him to leave. And as the train pulled out of the station, you could see it in her face, regret. The kind that hits you too late. That realization that you just let go of the one thing you were sure of. Belly broke down, whispering to herself the things she should have said to him. She knew her truth now. She had brown eyes, brown hair, and she loved Conrad. Simple as that. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was certainty. That's when everything changed. She ran after him, heart racing, desperate to fix the mistake. And when she found him on that train, she finally told him everything she couldn't before, that this was her choice, that she was choosing him of her own free will, and that if there were infinite worlds, she'd choose him in every single one. That line hit hard, because after everything, it wasn't fate pulling them together anymore. It was choice. Real, honest choice. After that moment on the train, everything shifted. Belly and Conrad finally found their peace, not the fragile kind they'd always chased, but something real. They stayed in Paris together for the rest of the summer, and for once, there were no games. No hesitation, no middle ground. Just them. It felt like time had frozen. You could see how much they'd both changed since that first summer at Cousins. They weren't kids anymore. They were two people who had lost, grown, and finally decided to stop running from what was always meant to be. But as the story moved forward, the show didn't let the focus stay only on them. Back in the States, we saw Jeremiah trying to rebuild his life piece by piece. After walking away from the wedding a year ago, he hadn't been back to the house in Cousins. That place carried too many memories, some good, most painful. But fate has a way of pulling people back to the places they've been avoiding, and for Jeremiah, that came in the form of his cooking event. What started as a disaster slowly turned into one of the most important nights of his life. The bar he booked for the event had a leak, the power was cutting out, and things were falling apart fast. But then came Denise. She suggested moving the whole dinner to Cousins, and even though Jeremiah hesitated, he knew deep down that it was time to face everything he'd been avoiding. When he walked into that house again, you could almost feel the ghosts of every summer that came before, the laughter, the arguments, the heartbreak. But this time, it wasn't about Belly or Conrad. It was about him. There was something different about Jeremiah in this episode. Gone was the boy who lived in his brother's shadow, always comparing, always competing. What we saw instead was a man trying to find his own way, grounded, calm, and ready to stand on his own. Still, you could tell he wasn't fully there yet. Deep down, that insecurity lingered, the constant feeling that he'd never measure up to Conrad. But Denise, in her quiet and steady way, broke through that wall. She told him he was enough as he was, that he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. That moment hit harder than expected. Their chemistry was unexpected too. What started as friendship slowly turned into something neither of them planned. During the dinner, Jeremiah confessed that he regretted not kissing her before. And when he finally leaned in, you could feel that hesitation, that fear that maybe this was another mistake. But Denise didn't let him pull away. She kissed him back, and for the first time in a long time, Jeremiah didn't look lost. He looked happy. It wasn't about chasing someone else's love anymore. It was about finding his own. As the night went on, his dinner turned out better than anyone expected. Guests laughed, plates emptied, and the tension that had followed him for years seemed to fade away. The biggest moment, though, came when his father, Adam, showed up. The last time they'd spoken, things hadn't ended well. But Adam's expression said it all: pride, relief, maybe even guilt for how things had gone. When he told Jeremiah he was proud of him, you could see the weight lift off Jeremiah's shoulders. It wasn't loud or emotional. It was quiet, simple, but it meant everything. Then came that small but powerful scene at the table. Everyone was laughing, passing around glasses, and right there under the table, Jeremiah reached for Denise's hand. She didn't hesitate. She squeezed back, smiling at him in a way that said it all. He'd finally moved on from Belly, and for once, he didn't need to pretend. The champagne they were drinking, it was the same bottle from his almost wedding. The symbolism couldn't have been clearer. What once represented heartbreak now marked a new beginning. He was ready to let go. And while Jeremiah found his own version of peace, the show balanced it perfectly with moments of humor and lightness through Taylor and Steven. Those two have always been the comic relief of the story, but in this episode, their relationship took a more grounded turn. Taylor found out, by accident, that Steven was planning to move to San Francisco for work. He hadn't told her, which instantly sparked tension, especially since she'd just moved to Boston with him. You could tell she wanted to play it cool, act unbothered. But Taylor has never been one to hide her feelings for long. Her frustration came out in that playful yet serious tone only she can pull off, joking one second, dead serious the next. The situation wasn't about distance. It was about trust. She wanted to know why he didn't tell her, and he wanted to explain without making it sound like an excuse. The balance between humor and emotion was spot on. Their chemistry carried the whole subplot. Later, when they were on the lake, the energy shifted. Away from the noise, away from everyone else, Steven opened up. He told her he didn't want to feel like he was holding her back. He knew what she'd gone through before, the way she'd sacrificed her own happiness for others, and he didn't want to be another person keeping her stuck. Taylor's response was simple but powerful: "I wouldn't move for you. I'd move with you." That line said it all. It wasn't about sacrifice. It was about partnership. From there, it was clear. They weren't just another side couple thrown in for laughs. They'd become one of the most genuine parts of the story. The lake scene wrapped up their arc beautifully: calm water, fading sunset. The kind of peace that tells you everything's going to be okay. By the end of it, Steven and Taylor had their happy ending too. They deserved it. Back in Paris, Belly and Conrad's story came full circle. They eventually returned to Cousins as a couple, walking through the same house that once tore them apart. Only this time with a kind of peace that felt permanent. They'd finally become the version of themselves they were always meant to be. Not the broken kids from the first summer, but to people who fought their way back to each other. By the time the dust settled, You could feel that quiet sense of finality hanging over everything. The story that started with sunburns and secret glances on Cousin's beach had reached its end. And it wasn't loud or overly dramatic. It was mature, calm, and honest. That was what made it so powerful. Belly and Conrad's love had always been messy, unpredictable, sometimes even frustrating. But that's what made it real. When they finally returned to the cousin's house, it didn't feel like the beginning of another chapter. It felt like home. The laughter that once echoed through those walls came back. But this time it wasn't haunted by what-ifs or almosts. It was full of peace. The show didn't spell everything out, and that's what made it land so well. We saw glimpses of them just sitting on the porch, drinking coffee, talking about ordinary things. There wasn't a need for dramatic declarations anymore. Just presence. That's what love had become for them, quiet, steady, and lasting. You could see the difference in how they looked at each other. It wasn't the same intensity from the earlier seasons when they were both caught up in confusion. This was softer, more certain. Conrad wasn't running anymore, and Belly wasn't overthinking every move. After years of uncertainty, they were finally still, but even with that peace, the episode never lost that bittersweet undertone. There was this subtle reminder that time moves forward and people grow apart. Even the closest ones. Jeremiah had found his place, Taylor and Stephen had chosen each other. And now Belly and Conrad were starting their own chapter. For fans who had followed this love triangle since the beginning, it was impossible not to feel emotional. It wasn't just the end of a story. It was the end of an era. One of the most beautiful things about this finale was the way it connected back to the very first season. The same places, the same feelings, but completely different people. That circular storytelling, ending where it all began, gave everything a sense of closure. Cousins wasn't just a setting. It was a character in itself. Every summer, it held their best moments and their worst, and now it was letting them go. And then there was the soundtrack. This show has always known how to use music to hit emotions that words can't. In this episode, the choices were deliberate, melancholic but warm, nostalgic but hopeful. When that song played during the montage of Belly walking along the beach, barefoot and smiling, it felt like a goodbye not just to the characters but to the audience too. Like the show was saying, you've grown up with them. Now it's time to let go. Still, the finale didn't tie every ribbon neatly. It left just enough open to feel real. We didn't see wedding bells or some exaggerated happily ever after. We just saw people choosing to love, and that was enough. Belly narrating those final lines, talking about certainty and choice, pulled everything together. It reminded us that growing up isn't about figuring out everything at once. It's about learning to be okay with not knowing, but still choosing what feels right in the moment. Her voice cracked a little when she said, "Every summer changes you." That line alone summed up the entire show. Every summer really did change her from a naive girl in love with an idea to a woman who understood what love costs and why it's worth it. You could see it in her eyes. That quiet maturity that comes when you've finally stopped fighting yourself. Meanwhile, Jeremiah's arc quietly echoed that same theme. After the chaos of his past summers, he didn't need validation anymore. He had peace with himself. That moment of him sitting on the porch, laughing with Denise, felt small. But it was the kind of small that means everything. He wasn't trying to compete with his brother or win anyone's heart. He'd found his own kind of happiness and it suited him. You could tell he'd grown into the kind of man who didn't need to prove anything anymore. Stephen and Taylor, on the other hand, brought lightness to the closing moments. They were the perfect reminder that not every love story needs to be tragic or heavy. Sometimes it's enough to just have someone who makes you laugh even when things don't make sense. Their final scene together, dancing around the kitchen while packing boxes, was pure joy. No drama, no overthinking, just two people enjoying the moment. It tied into the larger theme perfectly. Love can be complicated, but it can also be simple. As the final few minutes rolled in, the cinematography slowed down, mirroring the calm after a long storm. Belly stood on the porch of the cousin's house one last time, looking out toward the beach. The same place where everything began. You could feel that mix of nostalgia and relief, like she was finally ready to let go of everything that had haunted her. Conrad came out, handed her a cup of coffee, and they just stood there. No words, no music, just silence. And sometimes, silence says more than anything else. The closing narration talked about how some summers are meant to test you. Some are meant to heal you, and some, like this one, are meant to change you for good. And with that, the show ended exactly how it should have, not with a bang, but with peace. The love triangle that once defined the show wasn't really the point anymore. It was always about growing up, learning to forgive, and finally understanding that the person you become matters more than who you end up with. And when the screen faded to black, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like a soft goodbye. The kind that leaves you smiling through the ache. Now, Looking deeper into what this finale really meant, it wasn't just about Belly choosing Conrad. It was about her finally choosing herself in the process. For 2 full seasons, we watched her wrestle with what love should feel like versus what it actually does. The finale didn't give us some perfect fantasy ending. It gave us something honest. Love isn't a fairy tale on the beach. It's messy, uncertain, and sometimes painful. But when it's real, it finds its way back, even after all the wrong turns. That's exactly what this ending showed. You could tell the writers wanted to bring this story full circle without making it predictable. From the way Belly carried herself to how Conrad finally let his guard down. Every scene was intentional. There was this quiet maturity in their interactions. The kind that only comes after heartbreak and growth. It's like they finally saw each other for who they truly were, not who they wanted each other to be. That shift made all the difference. You could almost feel the weight lifting off both of them. Like they were done running from what they already knew. One of the most powerful moments wasn't even romantic. It was that short, reflective scene between Belly and Laurel, mother and daughter. Finally understanding each other. For seasons, Laurel's been this grounding force, sometimes misunderstood, sometimes too blunt. But always right in her own quiet way. When she told Belly that love doesn't have to be loud to be real, it hit deep. Because that's exactly what Belly had to learn the hard way. It wasn't about who chased harder, who fought louder. It was about who stayed when everything got quiet, and then there's Susanna's presence. Still felt even years later. The show never really let go of her, and that's what made it beautiful. Every choice, every summer still tied back to her somehow. You could sense her memory guiding them. Like the heart of cousins never stopped beating because of her. It's almost like Susanna became the spirit of the beach, a reminder that love, even when lost, doesn't disappear. It lingers in places, in people, in small moments. That scene where Belly looked out at the ocean and smiled softly, that wasn't just nostalgia. That was gratitude. What's interesting is how each character's closure reflected a different form of love. Conrad's was about redemption, Jeremiah's was about acceptance, Laurel's was about healing, and Belly's was about self-discovery. The finale balanced all of that without losing its emotional depth. It didn't overdo anything, it just felt right. That's rare for a show that started as a love triangle. Instead of dragging it out or forcing an ending, they let the characters breathe. And it worked, and the pacing, slow, intentional. Almost like the show wanted you to sit with your emotions instead of rushing through them. Every pause, every silence carried weight. You didn't need dialogue to understand what they were feeling. The looks, the gestures, the timing, everything spoke louder than words. It's the kind of emotional storytelling that doesn't need big twists to hit hard. It just needs truth, still. It wouldn't be The Summer I Turned Pretty without leaving us with a little bit of that aching curiosity, that quiet what happens next moment. The finale didn't show too much of their future. And that's what made it linger in your mind. Maybe that's why people can't stop talking about it. Because it didn't end in a box. It ended like life, open, imperfect, and hopeful. And if you look closely, the final beach montage wasn't just about memory. It was a timeline. Each flash, Belly reading, Jeremiah laughing, Conrad watching the waves, symbolized how far they'd come. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was evolution. Those quick cuts told the entire emotional story without a single line of dialogue. The show trusted its audience enough to feel instead of being told. And that's a level of storytelling that hits different. It's also worth noting how much the show has matured visually since season 1. The cinematography went from warm, dreamy summer tones to more grounded, muted ones, almost like reflecting Belly's emotional growth. That shift in color palette told its own story. The golden, sun-soaked summers turned into something softer, calmer, still beautiful, but real. It wasn't about fantasy anymore. It was about what comes after the fantasy fades, even the music. It was all symbolic. That last song choice wasn't random. It was deliberate. It mirrored the emotional arc perfectly, a mix of peace and pain, closure and new beginnings. When you hear those final lyrics as Belly and Conrad walk off into the distance, you realize that it's not just an ending for them. It's an ending for us. For everyone who grew up with this story, watched it evolve, and maybe saw a bit of themselves in it, the creators didn't just wrap a love story. They wrapped a coming-of-age journey that was messy, relatable, and real. It wasn't about who Belly loved more. It was about how love changed her. How it broke her, taught her, and rebuilt her. And that's something every viewer could feel. That's why the finale hit the way it did. It didn't try to be perfect. It just tried to be honest. By the time the credits rolled, you couldn't help but think back to the first episode, Belly arriving at Cousin's Beach, wide-eyed, hopeful, and unsure. Now she was leaving it as someone who knew exactly who she was. That kind of growth doesn't happen overnight, and the show didn't pretend it did. It showed the mess, the mistakes, the growing pains. And that's what made it authentic. When a series can make you look back and feel like you grew up a little too, that's when you know it did something special. And this finale? It did exactly that. By the time that final scene faded out, it didn't even feel like we'd just finished watching an episode. It felt like we'd lived through something. That's what The Summer I Turned Pretty does so well. It takes something that could have been just another teenage love story and turns it into this soft, emotional journey that grows up with you. And this finale, Season 3 Episode 11, wasn't just about wrapping up a storyline. It was about showing how far everyone had come, not just Belly, but all of them. Conrad, Jeremiah, Taylor, Steven, even Laurel, every one of them had their moment of truth. And every one of them felt real. What really stood out in this final chapter was how mature the storytelling became. Early on, the show lived off its chaos, the triangles, the jealousy, the uncertainty. But now, it's like everyone finally learned that growing up doesn't mean having all the answers. It just means accepting that some questions never go away. Belly didn't need to fix everything. She just needed to stop running from what she felt. And once she did, everything else started to make sense. That quiet confidence she carried in those final moments, that was growth. That was healing. In Conrad, for the first time, we saw him open up without fear. He's always been the type to hold everything in, to pretend like he's fine even when he's breaking inside. But here, he finally let go. You could tell he wasn't just fighting for Belly anymore. He was fighting for peace, for his own sense of closure. That subtle smile, that look of relief, it wasn't loud, but it was powerful. It said everything words couldn't. It felt like the version of Conrad we'd all been waiting to see since the very beginning finally showed up. Jeremiah, on the other hand, walked away with grace. And that's what made his ending hit so hard. He didn't get the girl, but he got his dignity back. He learned that love isn't about possession. It's about letting someone be happy even if it's not with you. That's real love. It's painful, but it's freeing. And in a way, Jeremiah became the most mature one out of everyone. He didn't crumble, he didn't lash out, he just accepted it. You could see it in his eyes, that mix of heartbreak and peace. It's bittersweet, but it's also beautiful. The show could have easily made the finale dramatic. Big tears, explosive arguments, over-the-top emotion. But instead, they chose silence, stillness. It was calm. And that calm hit deeper than any shouting ever could. That's the difference between a show that's trying to end and a show that knows how to end. They didn't force it. They let the story speak for itself. The writers trusted the audience enough to fill in the gaps, to feel the unspoken things. And that's what made it so impactful, and the audience reaction. You can already feel it. Social media's buzzing, people are still crying. Still replaying that last montage. Because it didn't just give closure. It gave nostalgia. It reminded everyone of the first time they watched the show, when everything felt new and uncertain. Now, it feels like we all grew up with these characters. We laughed with them, we cried with them, and we saw pieces of ourselves in them. That's rare. Most shows fade when they end. This one left a mark. What makes this finale so strong is how it quietly tied every theme together: grief, love, change, forgiveness. It showed that sometimes closure doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it's a soft goodbye. Sometimes it's a smile after years of confusion. That final image of Belly and Conrad walking together wasn't just romantic, it was symbolic. It meant all the storms were worth it. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every wrong turn led them right here. And in that moment, you knew it was all finally okay. The legacy of The Summer I Turned Pretty isn't about Team Conrad or Team Jeremiah. It's about growing up. About realizing that love, family, and loss are all connected in ways we can't control. It's about how one summer can change everything and how, even years later, you can still feel its echo. That's what makes this story timeless. It captured that transition from innocence to experience, from fantasy to reality. In a way few shows ever manage to. By the end, there's no perfect ending. Just a real one. Life moves forward and so do they. Cousins Beach will always be there, not as a place, but as a memory, a moment frozen in time. And for us viewers, that's what we're left with too. A sense of peace. A sense of goodbye. But also a quiet hope that maybe, somewhere down the line, we'll see them again. Because stories like this don't just end, they stay with you. So if this really was the last time we saw Belly and the boys of Cousins, it was the right goodbye. Gentle, emotional, and complete. It didn't need to shock, it just needed to feel, and it did exactly that. The kind of finale that makes you sit in silence after the credits roll, still thinking about everything that happened. That's when you know it was special. And maybe that's the message the show wanted to leave behind. That growing up doesn't mean forgetting where you came from. It means carrying it with you, learning from it, and finding peace in what was once painful. That's what The Summer I Turned Pretty taught us. It wasn't just about who Belly ended up with. It was about who she became because of it all. And in the end, that's the most beautiful thing of all.